When it comes to speaking in public, I think we all know the kind of things we're trying to avoid. Slides crammed full of text and crazy colours. Speaking with your back to the audience and showing everyone fancy figures they can't read that make you look intelligent. Forgetting to turn your screensaver off? Make sure you are connected to the internet when you want to demonstrate something online. Speaking too long or clamming up. Being boring or being just a little bit too enthusiastic.
I am doing that!
But how do you present with real impact? Well, I'm going to tell you a few things I've learned over the years, and I think it's important to say this is not coming from someone who is naturally confident or a natural speaker. The first lecture that I ever gave, in fact, back at the University of Leeds, was a complete disaster. I had a panic attack mid-lecture. Everything went blank. I had no idea what anything on the screen meant, and I ended up getting heckled by one of the 200 students in the room. It was a mortifying experience. I picked myself up, kept going, got some advice from some colleagues who taught me about confident body language and the way in which if you are incredibly confident with the way that you act with your body, you not only fool your audience into thinking that you're feeling quite relaxed, you actually start to feel relaxed yourself. And it's a remarkable thing. To this day, I get incredibly nervous before I have to do public speaking, and yet pretty much whenever I do speak, if you speak to an audience member, they'll say that I looked completely calm. Amazing. So, I'm giving a talk later on today, which I am a bit nervous about, in all honesty, and I thought I'd put together a short video diary of leading up to this so that you can see what, for me at least, goes into the preparation of a talk that will have real impact. And I think it's a fallacy to think that a natural presenter just stands up and does it, and if I can just practice enough, I'll just be able to get up there without any preparation whatsoever and just do something that will knock everyone dead. A good talk takes a huge amount of preparation or polishing, as I will explain later. 4:45 in the morning, and I'm getting myself ready to get into the car and get to the airport to travel down to the Peak District. Couldn't get to sleep last night, unfortunately, for planning, thinking about today, but at this point I'm too tired to be worried, so I'll get myself ready and get on. So I'm at the airport now, and just enough time to do a bit more preparation for my talk today. It's a slightly unusual one for me. It's part of ESRC's Festival of Social Science. It's an event called A Science in the Park, organised by the Peak District National Park. And they've asked me to talk about the research that I've done there and on peatlands and uplands more generally. But of course it's an audience of families who are going to want something very short, but simple and engaging, and that is my challenge today, to come up with something like that. I'm also meant to be doing a series of storytelling sessions based on a story that was written about my research. So I need to prepare some slides and get all of this into my head between now and when I get to the Peak District. When I do talks like this that are meant to be short, or if they are particularly high risk, high stakes, and today it feels kind of like that given the audience that I've got, I like to try and memorise as much as I can of what I'm going to talk about. I can deviate if I want, but I've got a backbone to come back to. Luckily, I am building these slides in this talk on something I did before my inaugural professorial lecture. It is going to be quite different though, so I do need to work out exactly what I'm going to say and start to try and memorise this and get this into my head. So I better get on and get into the airport now.
Ladies and gentlemen, next stop near Mills Newtown, if you're in the service, please mind the gap between the train and the platform edge.
I seem to be out riding over the hills in the northernmost reach of my kingdom. Yet I did not fully recognise the hills. They seem different somehow. So the next time you climb a mountain or go for a walk through a heather moorland, I hope that you will look again at that beautiful view. So it all went well on the day, despite some nerves and lots of preparation. There were some enthralled children for the stories, and the presentation was fine. So how do you present with real impact? I'm going to spend the last part of this talk going through what for me are my top 5 tips in how to really make an impact with what you say. The first of these tips is to make sure that you really have purpose. At the beginning of your talk, you've got a few seconds typically to get your audience on side and thinking, you know what, this sounds interesting, I'm interested, I'm going to listen. If in that first few seconds you make it clear to people that this is going to be boring, it's not relevant, they turn off, and it's incredibly hard to get them to switch back on to you. So grab their attention and let people know exactly where they stand. What is your purpose? And what is it tangibly that your audience is going to get from engaging with you and listening to what you're about to say? And crucially, why is that actually really important? Why do you really need to sit up and listen to this? You need to explain your credentials as well, and why it is that they should trust you and listen to you and learn from you. There needs to be some reason for them listening to you rather than someone else. And explain what's coming next. Have a plan, make sure you stick to it. People like to know exactly where they are. The second of my 5 tips is to connect. I believe that the best speakers always empathise really effectively with their audiences, so that their audiences really identify with them. What do I mean by empathy? Basically, it's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And in this case, you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of your audience. Now, it can be hard enough to do this with an individual that you've not met. With an entire audience of people, it's quite a challenge. So how do you empathise and connect with a diverse audience of people? Well, for me, the first answer is that you need to actually do your research. You need to know exactly who it is that you're talking to. If you don't know who they are, then try and understand what their interests are, why they're here, where they've come from. You can do a lot of this research on the internet, but if you start out completely with a blank canvas, then make that time before you go on stage to actually talk to the people in the front row. Make some small talk and find out who they are and what they're motivated by. Stories are incredibly powerful as a mechanism for connecting with your audience at beyond intelligence level to the point of emotions. And it's not just any old story that's going to work. In particular, stories that have impact are stories which are in some way personal,
So that enables you to reach out to your audience as a human being just like them, who's got common fears, hopes, etc. Typically, something unexpected in your story will give it impact, make people really sit up and listen. Stories which have a visual element that you can either imagine or in an ideal world that you can put up on a screen behind you can really give you impact. And having some kind of visceral element to what you're doing can be really important too, engaging at that level of the emotions. I find it useful to ask you-focused questions to really turn this on your audience and make them think about, what does this mean for me, for my organisation, in my context, for my learning? So what would you do if this happened? And use your body language to your advantage. I've talked about how I've used body language to relax myself and to make my audience feel at ease. But it's crucial to have confident body language, which is open and approachable, which is positive and energized, so that people are sitting up and they're alive. And it takes a lot of energy and stamina to do that through a talk, especially depending on where you are in the day, but it will pay dividends. And typically your audience ends up subconsciously mirroring you. So if they're falling asleep after lunch and you're kind of like, yeah, whatever, then they'll just fall fast asleep. But if you're really up there and energized and keyed up, then they start to kind of, pay attention. The third point then is about being authoritative and passionate. For me, being authoritative isn't about standing up there and being in any way intimidating. It's about knowing your stuff and being confident in your stuff and being able to present clearly and concisely so that everyone understands exactly where you're coming from. Part of creating that authoritative air is your body language. And one key thing that I think can really detract from that authoritative nature is poor body language in terms of how you stand. So I think most of us are too busy thinking about what we're going to say to bother actually looking at our feet. And typically what you should do in a good presentation is to choose a home position where you start and choose then other stations around the room where you might move to. And in each of those places, you keep your feet rooted to the ground. You might bend your knees a little, but you're staying there stable and secure and confident in what you are saying. If on the other hand you're kind of swaying from side to side, or you're kind of doing a bit of dance up and down, there's a sense of, this guy's a bit nervous, he doesn't really believe what he's talking about, or even just a sense of being distracted by, he's all over the place, I can't even work out where he is. So stay where you are, and if you want to move to a position and use that to make a point. So now I'm going to tell a story, this is a bit of an aside, and you move to the side. And here's a new point, I'm going to move over here. Using emphasis can really help you to get your message across with impact. Now, there are lots of different ways in which you can have emphasis in the way in which you speak. Some people like to slow down and spell out their key points. You might use volume. I just very subtly used it there. We don't want to be like a kind of a preacher who's shouting at his audience. We can use volume subtly. Varying your intonation, going up and down. If you are a natural monotone, it takes some work to really consciously be aware of that and to vary your voice up and down. You might feel that this feels a bit fake, but typically, if you just do it a bit, people won't notice that this isn't out of the ordinary. A pause and dramatic silence can also be very useful. So this is my point. The fourth point then is to try and keep things as simple as you possibly can. For me, if you possibly can, it's about identifying one memorable key message. The message from this presentation, if you haven't got it yet, is empathy. I want you to learn that it's about putting yourself in your audience's shoes, and if you do that effectively, all the rest of it will come. Of course, you may want to be a little bit more complicated than that, but I would still argue that each of these different points that you're making, try and construct them into a narrative so that they keep coming back to your main message, that reinforce that message and make it even more memorable. And people will remember that key message, and then from that they'll be able to trace back those different lines of argument and those other key points that you wanted to mention as well. Stories, as I've said, can really help to keep that message simple and to make it stick with people. Images equally, and metaphors can really be helpful in that regard. And finally, polish. As I said earlier on, and as I hope I demonstrated in my diary, practice makes perfect. Now, you can read my diary in two ways. One was that I put a lot of effort into memorising it and preparing it and planning it. The other is that actually, Mark, you left it until the day of the presentation and wrote your slides on the plane. So I'm not sure if I'm practising what I preached there, but the point I'm trying to make, either way, is that if you practice it, it will become better. And get feedback from other people. Record yourself, if you can't, on your laptop, on your phone. Try and work out, what are your bad habits? I have a nasty habit of going. It may be that you're an person. I just did one of those as well. I speak far too fast, and I try and consciously pause between bullets and slides. And use your visual aids to really add impact to your message. Don't use them as your notes. I think that having lots of words on a screen can sometimes detract from your message because you're so busy reading the words, you're not really listening to what the person is saying. So pay attention to these, to your graphics. Have a real think about the kind of visual metaphors that you might be able to use to really get your message across. And investing time in getting your PowerPoint exactly right can actually really pay big dividends. So I'll conclude with a visual metaphor for my key message. A picture of Ella, here aged 2, wearing her mother's shoes, and aged 22, wearing the same shoes. The point is here, you need to put yourself in their shoes. Have purpose, connect, be authoritative and passionate, keep it simple, and polish your shoes regularly.